A number of our staff in athletics are here today, and if they would all stand, I'd like them all to be recognized. We've had a lot of success. I'm going to get into that in a little bit, but the important part of that is the we. Everything that's been done has really been a collaborative effort, and the folks that stood up here this morning are a huge part of it. As also is a tenured faculty member in the College of Education, my wife Marjorie, who's here with us this morning. I'm going to try and work through this PowerPoint. It's not my area of expertise, I can tell you that. What's really interesting for most of you, athletics is something that you do to get away from your job, helps you relax. You have some passion. It's a diversion from the everyday for you. For us, it's what we do. It's our business. And I think what really makes it interesting and the dynamics and the dichotomy of college, intercollegiate athletics, is there is a really heavy business component to what we do, and there is the academic mission of graduating young men and women to what we do. And at times, I think that causes us to be, I think it creates some frustration on campus. I think we are unlike any other area on campus. The business side of what we do, from strategic planning to economic impact statements to the sales, the marketing, the corporate sponsorships, all those things are very much in a business environment. I think we test the limits of purchasing and some other areas on campus because we tend to operate at a quicker speed. Maybe the hospital is the only other entity that I think operates similarly to what we do in terms of the speed and the urgency of business, which is much like what all of you do in your day-to-day business life. And so at times I think that creates a little bit of a tug. But what in the end of the day, I think what's really important is we have great support from the regents, from President Frank, from the deans and the leadership of the university, and we're able to work through those challenges. I was trying to think of an example, and I think maybe the best example of some of the struggles was really the contract discussions that we had with Coach Alford. Let me be up front. Steve did a great job, and he's going to be missed, and we wish him no ill will. But in this example, we're literally having a discussion. We're bringing in $4+ million a year in ticket sales in men's basketball. That doesn't count the suite and club seat money, which is about another $2 million. We're trying to cement a long-term relationship with our basketball coach at a time, and we're talking about a man who's probably going to make about $1.2 million when it was all said and done. And we're talking now about trying to get a contract extension at a time when our faculty have gone 4 or 5 years without raises. And so as we're discussing what can we do, we're making money in basketball. It's our linchpin sport. What kind of investment do we need to make in basketball? We're balancing that with what we know would be the concerns on campus with paying a basketball coach that much, a major salary increase when faculty aren't getting raises. And so I think it points to the struggles at times that we're facing in our business. I also want to, I did mention economic impact. We have done an economic impact statement a couple of years ago. Tim Cass led that effort, and I know Dan Ballou is here from the Convention and Visitors Bureau. We work very closely with the Convention and Visitors Bureau trying to bring in events like the NCAA basketball tournament. Like next year we'll host the NCAA indoor track and field championships in the Convention Center. Those are real dollars that are coming into our community through the sports tourism, and we're very proud of the fact that not only Lobo Athletics, but these NCAA championships that we're able to bring into the community add real dollars to the city and to the state. I just got new furniture in my office, and I was going through my files, cleaning things up, also in preparation for this presentation. I came across some notes from when I was hired, and I'm starting my 8th year. And part of the presentation, and Janice may remember this because she was walking me around that day when I was hired, but part of my presentation that day, and what I still believe in to this day, are really what I think are the 4 key elements to a very successful, to a premier, what I call a premier athletic program. And you play to win. We have scoreboards in all of our facilities. This isn't club sports. We're in it to win. And I don't think we can lose sight of that. I think sometimes, you know, there's a highly competitive part to what we do, and just as importantly, the folks on the other side are trying to win as much as we are. But number one is, and these aren't necessarily in priority order. Play to win. Second is, we're in the business of education. If we don't graduate the young men and young women in our program, we're not going to be successful. Third is, you need resources to be great, and I'm going to spend a lot of time talking about where our resources come from and where we're stretched in terms of resources. But you have to have resources to be great. And the fourth is outstanding leadership, from the president and the board supporting you to the coaches and the staff. Like any other of your businesses, you have to have great leadership. I love this saying, vision without action is a daydream, action without a vision is a nightmare. I think you can all relate to that. When we first arrived, and Tim and I started about a month apart, we had the fortune of walking into a situation where Governor Richardson had provided $6 million for an indoor practice facility. And there was discussions already ongoing on where we were going to build it. But we had no facility master plan, we had no strategic plan, we had no idea where to build this thing, and we literally had our football staff saying, oh, I think it ought to go here. Scott and his staff were thinking it ought to go here, but there was no concept of a larger plan from a facility standpoint. And so we went about the process of creating a facility master plan, and it's amazing, 7 years later, how many of those facilities have been built. We cited them in the right places for the right reasons, as well as we developed a strategic plan that really charted our course. I'm not going to read all this stuff to you, but you can see our mission statement. That was part of the process, was create a mission statement, create some core values, create some goals. The core values, one of which I think, and I would tell you that these may in fact be in priority order, although as we laid them out, we weren't thinking in that context. But the student-athlete experience, one of the things that we do that I'm very proud of is we exit interview our student-athletes. Gig Brummel's been our athletic counsel. He's participated in one form of those interviews, which is interviews with our faculty and staff and alumni representatives on campus. The other is our sports coordinators meet with our student-athletes who are exhausting their eligibility, talk about their experience, talk about what's important to them. The last couple of years, the number one priority coming out of that group was nutrition. We need better nutrition. We need to understand nutrition better. We need a plan. Consequently, last year we hired a nutritionist for the first time, and it was interesting. I was in the weight room yesterday looking at our new incoming freshman football players, and our nutritionist is in these guys' faces about what to eat, when to eat, how to eat. And when you're getting the student athletes in as incoming freshmen, they're much more moldable, and they'll listen much better as opposed to juniors and seniors who think they know the right way. But we do pay attention to these, they guide us, and that's an example of our core values, the student athlete experience. The other one is community engagement. We did 8,000 hours of community service last year in Albuquerque, and this year we'll be at about 7,500 hours of community service. That's our athletes, that's our coaches, and that's our leadership team. So here we have 10 goals. As I said, we created a facility master plan, a strategic master plan, a 6-year strategic plan. We're actually entering the last year of that plan. 10 goals with various objectives under each goal. I won't go into all of them, but one of them that I think we've paid a particular amount of attention to, and in the reality we've paid attention to all of them. The one is branding. Consistent use of our marks, really police our marks. It includes things like website and social media, all those good things. Merchandising, Doug mentions license plates. We manage the licensing for the university, which is the use of our marks. We share the revenue with the Alumni Association. So please, everybody buy a UNM license plate. We get half the money off of that, and the Alumni Association gets the other half. But this really, I think, is a great example of our concern and our efforts to branding. If you notice on this picture, Mike Golick who's the guy on the right. In front of him on these bobbleheads are Lobo Louie and Lobo Lucy. And that just didn't happen. We actually knew people at ESPN. Brad Hutchins of our staff called ESPN. He knew a producer and said, you've got all these bobbleheads in front. Wouldn't it be nice to have some Lobo bobbleheads? And what's unique is there are very few schools in the country who actually have a male and a female mascot. But we sent the Mike and Mike show, which is on radio. It's actually broadcasting right now on radio, and then it's simulcast on TV. We sent them the bobbleheads, and you can see Lobo, Louie, and Lucy displayed there. Here are the other goals. And before I get off branding, let me give you a couple of statistics. We average just under 8 million views on our website the last 3 years. That's 650,000 visitors a month. Facebook and Twitter, I've been dragged into the Twitter world. I got a lot of attention for when we hired Coach Neal. I tweeted noodles, and it became, got a lot of attention, and that's, so we recognize the importance of social media. 3 years ago, we had 17,000 followers on friends on Facebook and 1,600 followers on Twitter. As of this morning, we're over 65,000 followers or friends on Facebook and 14,000 on Twitter. And that puts us in the top 50 in the country in intercollegiate athletics. Why is that important? Because it's now a very, as you all know from your own businesses, a very effective way of getting the message out. You see the other 5 goals. I will tell you without question the biggest challenge we have as it relates to goals is financial stability. We operate in a very competitive environment, a very dynamic environment. The changes in our conference, the changes in television, 40% of our revenue is soft dollars that we've got to go out and find folks such as yourselves to join the Lobo Club to buy tickets. If the economy struggles like it has, if our teams struggle like one of them in particular has, we feel the effects of that every year. And so as we talk about our goals, without question, the biggest struggle we have and continue to have is financial stability. So here's the fun stuff. This is our revenue budget for this fiscal year that's just been completed. And let me walk you through some of these. And again, I guess we'll have time for questions, Ernest and Doug, at the end. But we are either number 1 and number 2 in our conference every year in ticket sales and in corporate sponsorships. And corporate sponsorships, in our case, means our Lobo Sports properties. As an example, that $6.6 million in ticket sales, that does not include money from the club seats and from the suites in basketball, but includes all other ticket sales. Roughly $4.2 million of that comes from men's basketball. We're at about 1.8, I think, 1.7 in football. Michigan, the University of, and I'm an Ohio State grad, but the University of Michigan, $40 million in ticket sales. Just so give you the sense of the environment we're competing in. I'm sure that Ohio State and Alabama and Notre Dame and Texas and some of these other schools are in the A&M or in that ballpark. Some a little bit more, some a little bit less. But Michigan generates or is expected to generate $40 million in football ticket sales alone. Our corporate sponsors, we have outsourced what's called our multimedia rights to a company called Learfield. We've created an entity called Lobo Sports Properties. Why did we do that? Because in the old days, we would go out and call on a company and ask you to buy radio or TV advertising. A month later, somebody'd come in and ask you to buy signage in one of our venues, maybe football. Later, we'd come in and talk to you about a ticket package. It was a very disjointed activity. We hired Lobo Sports Properties. The idea is one individual calling on you, presenting you a total inventory that we have to offer, from signage to radio to TV to sponsorships to a ticket package. They can sell you Lobo Club as a part of that. And we actually have one of the top 2 or 3 contracts in the country for non-BCS schools. We make more money off of our multimedia rights than schools like Texas Tech do. than schools like Indiana do. And the real reason is those of you in the community recognize how important Lobo sports are and have been incredibly supportive of us. And so corporate sponsors is a big number. Before I get totally off ticket sales, the real opportunity we have in ticket sales revenue growth is football. We're at about 96% capacity in men's basketball. Unless we raise prices, it's really, or add additional home games. And in fact, this year we're playing one less home game because we now have more teams in our league. The real opportunity for us in revenue on the ticket side is men's football. Other is a category that includes things like game guarantees, Texas paying us $1 million to play there, merchandising, parking revenue, when our athletes, when we sell the books back that they've used for the semester, NCAA reimbursement for postseason, and what's called a special assistance fund. The Mountain West NCAA number, that's our share of TV revenue, our share of bowl money, our share of the Mountain West basketball tournament. It's either coming from our conference office or the NCAA money usually flows through the conference office. When the Mountain West network, when the Mountain was in existence, we got about $1.2 million in TV revenue. We took a hit this year down to about $800,000 in TV revenue. Anybody want to guess what the Pac-10 or the Big 12 or any of those schools generate TV revenue a year? We're going to be at $800,000 this year. Anywhere between 20 to 22 million. So it gives you a sense of the environment and what we're competing against. Fortunately for us, the teams in our league are getting the same amount of money, and our number one priority is to beat the guys in our league. A lot of attention to student fees. We've been very fortunate. We've got an increase in student fees, but we're still in the middle of the pack in the conference in student fees. It's a very sensitive topic. I know it's a real issue for our student leaders as they're fighting to keep the cost of attendance down for the students. We get that, but I also believe that we offer real value to the university, and whether it's student fees or some other source of funding, we deserve support from the university. And we're not necessarily advocating for student fees so much as we are money from the university to help run our program. Right now, we self-generate about 81% of our own budget, which is the highest in the Mountain West Conference. State funding, believe it or not, I don't know why, but New Mexico State gets about $1 million more than we do in state funding for athletics. And then gift in kind is simply that. Business men and women in the community who donate services, product like restaurants, giving us vouchers, free hotel rooms for our recruits, those courtesy cars. That's a big number for us, and that really defers our expenses. That's a pretty good idea of our revenue side. What's not included in here, the one thing that's not included is Nike. When I arrived at the University of New Mexico, we were getting about $100,000 a year from our apparel partner, and it was mostly Nike, but I think we had some other people maybe using some other product. Tim Cass took the lead, and we worked very closely with Nike to try and develop a comprehensive department-wide apparel contract. We get $1 million a year in product from Nike, which isn't reflected on the revenue side nor on the expense side on our budget. We then allocate that to all of our teams, some to the band and some to the cheerleaders, and it really defers the expenses. It is the three best, and I don't know, I assume most of you are familiar with BCS or the term power conferences. The three best apparel deals for non-BCS schools are Memphis, Boise, and New Mexico. And really part of it is a relationship that we've established with Nike, and part of it is the fact is that Coach Alford was a high-profile coach. Coach Davies, a high-profile coach. Nationally, they have visibility, and these companies want to align themselves with these individuals. Again, using another analogy, if you're Ohio State, you're probably getting $1 million in cash a year, plus about $2 to $3 million in product. And there's basically two 2.5 competitors, Nike, Adidas, and on a limited basis, Under Armour. And every one of our sports, all of us wear Nike except one, and that's our men's golf program. They have such a great deal with Titleist and Ping that when we did our deal with Nike, we asked them to meet the existing contract that our golf team had, and they said, we can't match that. That is too good a deal. And that's really a testament to Coach Milliken and the coaches that have gone on before him of the relationships that they've cultivated with Nike. I mentioned Learfield and Lobo Sports Properties. I won't go into that again, but that's a big number for us, and that is that's one that we hope will continue to grow in the future. The expense side. One of the struggles we have, and again, you're all in business, you understand the challenges that you face. Basically, we have 3 major expenses: salaries and benefits, scholarships, and travel. Well, you all know what's happening in travel. Just an example, Southwest bags fly free. Everywhere else they don't. Well, we travel with a lot of equipment. So when your baseball team is traveling somewhere, if they can't get on Southwest, you're looking at, if you've got 25, 30 guys, you're looking at least 30 bags of equipment, maybe more. You know, every trip you take, and you just multiply that by the 21 teams we have, just baggage charges alone over the last couple of years have really, not to mention the continuing cost of fuel for travel. When we charter in football, one of the things we've done now to save money is we will buy out a Southwest flight before it goes on sale, buy every seat on the plane as opposed to chartering, and that saves us about $10,000. You can't do that on the return trip because you're leaving at an odd hour, and it has to be a regularly scheduled flight you're buying out. But that's one of the ways we've tried to save money. But everybody other than Southwest, you have a fuel surcharge. And so when you charter the plane in May or April, fuel is at X. When we fly in September, if the cost of fuel's gone up, you get hit with a $30,000, $15,000 fuel surcharge per flight. Well, you get 2 or 3 of those, and you've now got about $90,000 that you didn't budget for. So we try and fly Southwest whenever we can. Not only do they have the best flights in and out of Albuquerque, but it makes the most sense economically. Grant and aid. Mary Clark, former president of our staff council, Mary understands this. When we talk about tuition increases at the university, almost every other area of the university, tuition increase is a source of revenue. Boy, we're going to raise tuition, it's going to bring in more money, it'll help fund Anderson School and other areas. Tuition increase to us is an unfunded mandate. It simply means our scholarship costs just went up by 2%, 4%, whatever the increase is. Fees go up, lodging goes up. Our grant and aid bill has gone up over $1 million in about 4 or 5 years. And when those go up, that's literally a check we're writing to the university for that cost. And there's no corresponding money coming our way. So what do? We have to raise ticket prices. We have to go find that money somewhere in order to continue to survive financially. The other thing that this doesn't take into account, and one of the real benefits for us that we don't talk about a lot, is the Amigo scholarships and the WUI scholarships. Those, and frankly, the lottery scholarship, this does not reflect a lottery scholarship. If we actually paid the full cost of that lottery scholarship, our scholarship bill would be probably closer to $6 or $6.5 million. You can see some of the other expenses in there. The gift in kind is just an offset of the services coming in. Equipment and materials. Other are the game guarantees we pay, supplies, telecommunication, some of our on-call employees, and contract services. A lot of that is wrapped into what it costs us, all the expenses associated with running a football or basketball or women's basketball games, which is the 3 biggest expenditures there. So that's a little sense of the revenues and expenses, and again, I've tried to give you a sense of how that might compare to some of the folks nationally. So, how do we succeed? And you've seen some of the struggles. Let me tell you about the success stories. 2006, our one-year graduation rate for student athletes was 37%. I remember in the interview process talking about APR to some of the folks interviewing me, and they looked at me like, APR, what is that? Like, don't you folks understand there's this movement? I knew Janice and Don would have known, but a lot of the leadership of the university was not aware. If we did not pick up our graduation rates and our retention, we were going to have a lot of teams that would be ineligible to compete for championships. In 2006, our one-year graduation rate for student athletes was 37%. This most recent year, 2012, 60%. That's the second highest number ever. Last year we had 61%. That's still not where we want it to be, but we've moved the needle quite a bit. Conversely, in 2006, the UNM student body was at 41%. They're now at 45%. So there was a 15% gap between student athletes and the general student body. On the four-year graduation rates, you can see the same numbers: 44% for student athletes in 2006. 57 for student athletes in 2012. So we're very proud of that fact. It takes a lot of people to make that happen. We get tremendous support from advisors around campus, from professors around campus, Henry Villegas of our staff. There's a lot of people that have gone into making this happen, but we have really moved the needle on our graduation rates. We're very proud of that fact. The other number that's not on here, and these are federal graduation rates. The NCAA also has a number that they track called GSR, which basically is the federal graduation rate and takes into account young men and women who either transfer in or transfer out and graduate. Our GSR is 75%. So for all the student athletes who left here and graduated somewhere else, we're able to count those in the GSR, and we're at 75% graduation rate. Competitive excellence. How are we doing? The Learfield Directors Cup really measures how an athletic program, how competitive they are nationally. Every team that qualifies for an NCAA championship and scores gets points, and you add them up at the end of the year, and it recognizes the overall national competitiveness of your athletic program. In 2006, we finished 59th in the Directors Cup. We were 6th among non-BCS schools, and we were 4th in the Mountain West. Now, I would also tell you at that time, Utah and BYU were in the league. But the reality is, other than football, Utah has never really been much of a factor in most sports in this league. In 2011, we were 41st. We were 2nd non-BCS. The only school ahead of us was Princeton, and they offer about 40 sports. We were 1st in the Mountain West. In 2012, and I say 12, it's actually 12-13 this year, most recently completed. We finished 51st, 3rd among non-BCS. Princeton and BYU finished ahead of us, and we were 1st again in the Mountain West. The sports listed below are those sports that actually scored at a national level and where they finished. So we're very proud of the overall competitive success nationally of our programs. Some of the successes we've had: 12 conference players of the year, 12 individual champions in conference, 8 teams won a championship, 8 teams this year, 10 teams last year. We've won 18 championships in the last 2 years, the 2 most successful years in the history of New Mexico in terms of conference championships. 6 coaches of the year, you can see all the numbers. 1 national championship. If you'll notice, Coach of the Year, 6, Joe Franklin's 3 of those. Men's and women's cross country and indoor men's track. Joe has so many Coaches of the Year awards, he doesn't have enough. He has to build I think he's got like 26 Coach of the Year awards. It's unbelievable. Maybe our most unsung head coach. All he does is win. You don't read much about it. You don't hear much about Joe. Son of a gun just wins. Academic highlights. First time ever, 5 academic All-Americans. And I'll try and remember, we had a women's skier, had a women's basketball player, had a men's soccer player, and we had 2 track athletes, actually both here from Albuquerque, Gabe Aragon and Thomas Trujillo from Rio Rancho. We're both academic All-Americans. Anderson School, is that right? There you go. And one of the things we try and do when some of our student athletes, good things happen academically, we do try and notify the deans. Here's some folks in your college that you ought to know about that have really done something special. You see our cumulative GPA, 30 student athletes with a 4.0 or better. #1 in the conference in Scholar Athlete Award winners, #1 in all academic award winners. Maybe the most impressive statistic on here, we have 9 guys that'll be on our football team next fall who have already graduated. They're either working on their 2nd degree or they're working on a master's degree. I've never been around a program that I'm aware of that had 9 graduates that'll be playing in the fall. And to me, that's I think if nothing else, it dispels this myth of the dumb athlete. These are great kids who do wonderful things to represent our university and do it on the playing surfaces and in the classroom. So what are our challenges? #1 is conference upheaval, conference migration. If you follow athletics at all, you know the world's been turned upside down in the last 3 years. July 1, a lot of schools, I think there's like 40 schools that have moved to new conferences. I'm here to tell you that I think it's stabilized. Why has it stabilized? Because 4 of the top 6 conferences, when they did their new TV deals that are bringing them $22 million a year, what those schools had to do was give their media rights to the conference. So as an example, if Oklahoma wants to leave the Big 12, they're free to go, but their media rights stay with the Big 12. So Big 12 would own the broadcast of Oklahoma football, even though Oklahoma is now somewhere else. ACC did the same thing. Well, nobody wants you if you don't bring anything to the table, and when everybody controls, when the leagues control the media rights, it has effectively ended for most of the larger conferences, the conference migration. I think we've become probably a better conference. We're geographically aligned. We're schools of similar philosophy. And we were very close to imploding as a conference, and we've survived, and I think now we have not done the media rights deal. Our presidents have chosen not to do that. And so in theory, if one of us became really good and markets grew and had real value, somebody could come and try and pick us off at the Big 12 or the Pac-12, but those guys aren't interested in growing because they don't want to share any more money. The single biggest struggle we have, as I said, is economics. Why? Because we're getting $800,000 a year on our TV contract, and Ohio State and Michigan and all those guys are getting 21, 22 million. And we have a bad TV deal that we cannot get out of, and it's a little bit better, and we may get up to $1 million next year, but we really think, when I say 1 million, that's per school, we find ourselves locked in a bad TV deal, and we live in a part of the country where there aren't a lot of TV sets, and we don't have the market share that the larger conferences do, and so in theory, we're always going to have a little less TV money. The football playoffs are a very volatile discussion. At the end of the day, the haves don't want to share with the rest of us. They don't want any growth. This whole football playoff has been designed so that we continue to have limited, the Mountain West, the MAC, the Conference USA, the new American Conference, which was the old Big East, we're all going to have limited access to the playoff. Facilities become incredibly important in our business. You need strong facilities, you need good facilities to compete. And we're very fortunate that we get state money for facilities. Most other schools, most areas of the country aren't able to do that. But I got to tell you, one example where we're struggling is on the debt service on the pit. We built the pit, $42 million debt service, $3 million a year. The financial model was predicated on suites and club seats, which were basically sellout capacity in the suites. We're able to sell most of the club seats, but it was always predicated on a naming gift for the arena. We have not been able to secure that naming gift. So we are struggling mightily on the bond payments on the pit because we've never been able to find a sponsor, a naming gift. So Mike, if Bank of the West wants to name the pit, you and I can talk. So it's a challenge for us. The Coach Alford deal, I don't begrudge Steve for leaving, but you saw the kind of money in the paper today. And win or lose, if he gets fired, he walks out with $10.6 million. That is the salaries of coaches. If there's two things that keep me awake at night, one is our overall budget, and the other is our model is unsustainable. And I say I mean college athletics. You cannot pay coaches $4 and $5 million a year, and then the next year it's $6, and then it's $7. To me, the TV money at some point is going to dry up. It's not always going to be there. And I don't know how you justify paying a coach $4 or $5 million a year, and you've got student athletes who are struggling to find a coat or shoes to wear. I hired Urban Meyer at Bowling Green, gave him his first head coaching job. Urban was a wide receivers coach at Notre Dame. Never been a coordinator, never been a head coach. Paid him $125,000. $125,000. He's making $4 or $5 million today. I don't think he ever thought when he got into coaching that he was going to get rich. I think people get into it because just like they get into teaching, they want to make a difference in people's lives, they want to have an impact, but the money is just out of whack. The last thing that it may not mean anything to you, but it is a real lightning rod nationally, is the O'Bannon lawsuit. Ed O'Bannon, it was a guy that played basketball for UCLA. After he got done playing, he realized that his likeness and the likeness of other players like himself are on video games, are used to make money for schools, and he filed I'm not an attorney, but he filed a class action lawsuit. As of yesterday or the day before, the judge has agreed to allow current players to be a part of that class action lawsuit, and they're asking for money. For all former players. If this lawsuit, if the NCAA loses the lawsuit, it will really, I don't know how to predict what's going to happen. What I can tell you is that the financial model of every school, including the Notre Dames, the Michigans, the Ohio States of the world, are going to be blowing up because they're going to be paying current and former athletes a lot of money that otherwise are going to pay off debt service and build all these wonderful facilities they're building. So the O'Bannon lawsuit, I think how college athletics will look in the future, a huge piece of it will be predicated on the outcome of the O'Bannon lawsuit. So how do we compete? What can we do? Number one, we have great fans. I think 6 or 7 of the 8 sports we charge admission, we're in the top 30 or 40 in the country in attendance. You guys support us. You support us incredibly well. We've shown we have great national success. In spite of all these challenges, our teams win, and they win at a national level. Why? Number one, we've hired really good coaches with one noticeable exception, and we pay our head coaches well. In our business, it's a head coach-driven business. You're only as good as your head coach. We recognize we can't be there on the assistant coaching salary, but if we can attract and retain quality head coaches, we can compete. The geography and climate work to our advantage. If you're a golf program, if you're a tennis program, baseball, we think it's cold here for baseball. I've been in the Midwest where the first time you actually play a baseball game is the first time you've been outside all year, and it might be snowing, but you've got to get your 56 games in. And so the weather and the climate is a huge advantage for us. The Amigo scholarships is a huge advantage for us. Our conference is not as good with BYU out of there. As much as I hate to say that, as much as I dislike those guys, the arrogance, Utah really did competitively when it was all said and done. In the history of the Mountain West, BYU is number 1 in teams that have advanced to the NCAA tournament. You guys want to guess who's number 2? The Lobos. We've sent more teams with BYU out of the league. We've sent more teams to the NCAA tournaments than anybody else in our league. And Utah's nowhere on the map. Number 3 is San Diego State. We get great support from our president and our regents. And we get great state support. We get money from the state for facilities, which most other folks don't get. So how can you help us? Buy season tickets, join the Lobo Club, be the naming title sponsor of the pit.